And it just felt like this year in particular, like having some time alone in the woods to think a lot, just like seemed extra important.
This is A New Angle, and I'm your host, Justin Angle. This show is supported by First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and the University of Montana College of Business. Hey folks, welcome back. I am especially excited today to welcome my good friend Alan Adams back to A New Angle. 2020 was a hard year for pretty much everyone. Alan decided to make 2020 especially challenging on a singular dimension: vertical feet traveled. In honor of staring down his 40th birthday, Alan set out to climb 2 million vertical feet on his skis and bike in a single calendar year. Not only did he do that, but along the way, he upped the goal, set a record, and a whole lot more. So Alan, welcome back to the show. Thanks for putting down the skis long enough to visit with us for a little bit today.
Thanks, Justin. Happy to be here.
I got to ask, like, how are you feeling? Like, are you just sleeping 10 hours a day and like eating as much as you want? Like, what's your body feel like?
Oh, geez. It's sort of funny. It took about a month to come down from the whole thing.
Sure.
The first I pictured the week after I'm just going to like sleep a bunch and recover and rest. And then actually within a few days, I was like buzzing if I took a chill day. So I think the week after I still did like 50K or something, just because I wasn't ready to like slow down. But then I slowly sort of railed things down and actually took a first day off like 10 days into the new year. And, but yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Like I feel pretty darn normal, which, I guess surprises me. I don't know, I feel like mentally almost like a little more like challenged than the physical side, because it's like sort of had this big thing that took a bunch of time, and now it's like, oh, that's not there. And I have plenty of other things to fill the time and plenty of things I had to catch up on, but it definitely sort of left this little bit of a mental void. That's probably been the biggest adjustment, more one, to be honest.
Awesome. Well, we'll get into the mental aspects, I'm sure, today that are especially interesting to me. But before we get into that, just give us a quick introduction to how this project came to be. Like, what was the conception? Why do it? How did you at what point in sort of your deliberations did you feel like it might be something that's achievable?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like developed literally on the fly. Like I was out ski touring around Cook on New Year's, with Chelsea and our friends Michaela and Joe, and I was just thinking like, man, it's my birthday year, and I've always had this weird thing with birthdays being like, oh, dreading the getting older thing, and like haven't ticked certain life achievements off the list, and I just like I'm like, yeah, I want to do something sort of crazy, and I was like, man, 40, I like had in my head like my two favorite sports, biking, skiing, times 2, that's 4. I don't know, 0, 2 million. Like somehow the math just stupidly made sense. And I was like, why don't I see if I can do this? Like Greg Hill did this 2 million thing, and he's a pro athlete. That's cool. But like kind of regular Joe, like pull this off with like a job. And, I don't have family obligations really. I mean, it's just me, Chelsea, and her dog. We don't have like kids or anything. So it just seemed like a good time to like go for something big, because who knows how life shifts and changes and jumps around, and it seemed like the right time. I don't know. It was just sort of like this crazy idea, and I like ran it by them when we were out there, and they all sort of looked at me like, that's a lot. Are you sure? And Chelsea just like laughed, like, and then it just sort of snowballed, pun not intended. And just turned into this crazy project that was like super fun, really rewarding, and just, and it grew as I went on. It changed, it morphed, but just so much fun.
So you mentioned Greg Hill, professional athlete that did a version of this in the past, and you have been a professional athlete in your past, professional cyclist. So you've been able to sort of orient your life completely around a singular pursuit, but now that's not so much the case. I mean, you mentioned your constraints are maybe a little less than folks with kids or, a job where you have to clock in every day. But talk about how, like, when I think of that from my perspective, I mean, I certainly have doubts if I could accomplish something like that physically. But before I can even get to that question in my mind, like, I can't even get to a point where I could think about orienting my life around it to the point where the physical challenge would even be a question. So talk about how you kind of approach orienting your life around it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fortunate thing is where I live, obviously Bozeman, the access is right here. It's not like I
Mm-hmm.
live in Seattle where you got to like drive up to Snoqualmie Pass to go skiing every day. Like, I mean, I'm 15 minutes from Bridger Bowl, 15 minutes from like the little Mount Olive Academy ski hill. That's like a great ski mo training hill. When I'm in Cook, obviously, it's like we tour from the house, biking from the front yard. So all these things are really accessible from like a location perspective. And then, my schedule just, I mean, in all honesty, like COVID sort of exacerbated it to some extent, but like, I mean, I'm pretty introverted outside. I mean, I guess people would maybe think not because of what I do for work, but I really just like a lot of alone time in the mountains. And so to have this be something that I focused on was like, I don't know, it just fit. And, I like these weird, like, I mean, I'm a numbers guy. So I think like seeing this number of like, okay, and I set sort of like initial like targets each week or daily and just like kept a little spreadsheet. And it was just sort of like this weird little numbers game. And it was like numbers game alongside like long fun days in the mountains. Yeah. And it just added up to be like something that made sense for me. I think the past history of like, yeah, I mean, I wasn't necessarily a professional cyclist. I mean, I was on a professional-ish amateur elite team or whatever, but like I had that training background where I have like, years of endurance sort of base. But this was pretty different from that, to be honest, because it wasn't targeted. You're not like staring at your power meter or your heart rate. You're just sort of like chugging along each day, just seeing how you feel and, going on the fly because you can't structurally train for something like this. You just sort of have to go. Yeah, it just sort of made sense. I don't know why, but like my life is, I mean, I have it pretty dialed where it's like I have my toys, I have my, stuff all lined up. Like I have good gear. I'm not 22 years old, like scrapping together anymore. Like I have multiple ski setups of a binding breaks. I can hop on the next one the next day. And if one bike needs to go in the shop, I can grab the other one and go out. Like, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to accumulate those things. And so it just sort of like flowed. I mean, the bike shop was sort of funny. I'd like drop one bike off one day and 3 days later pick up the next one that they had fixed up or done something to. And then 3 days later drop off the next one, they were just laughing at it, but it all worked. I had the support system with Chelsea, with the gear and the bike shop and the skis, and it just all sort of fell together. But it's not like I went in with this big plan. It just sort of like all happened on the fly, which yeah, it just sort of worked out.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, you might not have had a plan, but you sort of knew the end number, and at the very least, were able to divide by 365 to understand, like, I got to at least get this many vertical feet in a given day, and start there. And then, I know I saw you somewhat early in the year, as I recall, and you were ahead of schedule. You had banked some miles as you sort of, or some as you thought about this. Were you thinking like, I really got to pound it early season, or this is a time on the bike where I really have to bank some feet, or, thinking like I noticed your fall, like you really, really nailed Bridger Bowl on your skimo setup for a big block. So how are you thinking about, like, once you got into it enough to know kind of what your body could do and not do on a given day, like how did you kind of approach it tactically, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, I mean, started off early was like just staying on this 5,500 foot a day target, and that was pretty realistic. Like on, fun skis around Cook, and then some occasional skimo workouts and skimo races, and then in March, in April, well, March, Bridger shut down because of COVID, and so there's a lot of days where I could go up there and like ski in the morning, and then come back downtown, and I was like, oh, okay, work a little bit, and then it's light out till later, and it's like, oh, I could go for a quick little bike ride after work and get a couple extra K or vert on my bike, and And I started stacking, honestly, because I was worried about getting COVID. Like, I was like, what if I get COVID and take a month off? Which sounds really stupid, but like, that's just in my head. I'm like, I need to get a month ahead. And then, it just kept stacking. And then I was like, oh, I haven't gotten COVID. And man, like, I live a life and that I can probably not get that if I'm careful. And so I became like militant about COVID precautions, like for my own health and just, the greater good, right? Like everyone was doing, and just kept stacking. I'm like, man, if I'm just out in the mountains, if I'm not working and I'm not at home with, doing house things, I could just be out in the woods on my mountain bike or on skis, and I won't get COVID, and I'm gonna have a really fun time. And then it just kept going. And I definitely like staggered it. Like, it was ski, and then it was ski and bike combo, and then it was like all bike, which it was hard to do that amount of vert all on bike. So definitely, like, I had to sort of meter that out a little bit more. And then it became in the fall, it was like this beautiful window again of like a combo of bike and ski. And then I banked a lot of vert in December early at Bridger, because I really wanted to make sure that I could enjoy like Christmas to New Year's with Chelsea and Cook City, and not be like having to bang out huge days at the end, like when the daylight's short and like she was on her holiday break. I just wanted to, push away that selfishness aspect and be like, stack it ahead. So yeah, I did like 2 weeks of like 10K days ish, just nailing them at Bridger on Skimo skis, which people thought I was nuts, but I was actually having a ton of fun. It was like ripping early season groomers on like these tiny little skinny skis, and they were light, and it was just like I could do like laps, and friends would join in and like do 2 or 3 with me, and then go back to work and or whatever. And it just, I don't know, it just like kept being so fun. Like it just kept stacking on itself.
At what stage did you make the decision to kind of go for 2.5 million? Like, what stage did you think that was possible, and talk us through that decision?
Yeah, so I think it was in April when I was doing all these days at Bridger and like getting some bike rides in the afternoon. I was like, wow, I'm stacked a month ahead almost. And if I don't get sick or don't get injured, I could like go bigger. And I remember reading about this guy, Aaron Rice, that had done 2.5 million. And granted, these guys all did it just on ski, so it's sort of like a different record in a way. Like, but I was like, man, I could do just human powered vertical, like exceed what Aaron Rice did, and that'd be pretty neat, And again, I'm a numbers guy, so like, I mean, I'm a sales guy, right? So it's like, you give me this target, it's like a stretch goal versus just the regular goal. You're still going to try to. It's like, oh, well, if I go for the stretch goal, I'll definitely hit the first goal. So then it just like snowballed, and I think if at any point I wasn't having fun with it, like I probably would have just been like, I set up for 2 mil, that's fine. But it just kept being fun, I guess. And like, I mean, there were a couple days here and there where it felt like I was just stacking bird or something, or rush squeezing it between work meetings and emails and just life. But I don't know. Overall, it was just like 90% plus percent of it was so much fun that I just wanted to just sort of keep it going. And it felt like a fun little extra, stretch goal, and just kept pushing. So, and I was learning a lot too, like just out there, like I guess a lot of time in my head, but also just like listening to podcasts and listening to the news and thinking a lot. And it just felt like this year in particular, like having some time alone in the woods to think a lot, just like seemed extra important.
A New Angle is supported by First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and UM's College of Business. Access to capital, broadband, and education are 3 ingredients any community needs for success.
Raging wildfires have scorched a record number of acres and killed at least 31
continues to climb from those devastating wildfires.
Last year, wildfires scorched a landmass nearly 5 times the size of Yellowstone National Park. It was the largest area burned since reliable records began. Fires are getting bigger and hotter and more devastating than ever before. But what all that fire means and what to do about it depends on who you ask.
The experience of a forest taking fire is really something.
Not only a gift to us, but it's more of a gift to the land.
There will always be fear of fire, I know that, and I don't pretend there won't be, but in certain situations there shouldn't be.
I'm Justin Engel, and for the last couple years, I've been talking to scientists, historians, and firefighters themselves to hear their stories.
You owe it to the guys that died.
I wanted to figure out, how did we get here?
We're going to knock fire out of the landscape.
Remember, only you can prevent forest fires.
It was a crazy ambition.
And where do we go?
It just, knowledge is freaking power.
I'll talk about it in a calm way, but this is me hitting the panic button.
Am I making any difference here with the science? That's what I wonder sometimes.
This is Fireline, a 6-part podcast series from Montana Public Radio and the University of Montana College of Business about what wildfire means for the West, our planet, and our way of life.
Hi, this is Joe Anderson. I am the CEO of Reflex Protect, and you're listening to A New Angle.
The way our world was, it felt so weird in the regular scheme of just everything going on with COVID and, all the, obviously the political stuff and then the social justice stuff. And everything just felt like the world was falling apart. And I'm like, I can go for this huge record and control one little part of the world that can be just awesome right now for me. And it's not changing the bigger picture other than maybe some people are, following it and getting motivation to go outside more themselves, which actually became this secondary awesome goal at the end that I didn't realize was there, but then became this awesome thing. Yeah. So it just sort of felt right when everything else felt wrong. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And you probably were able to kind of it's an escape in some ways. You can focus your energy on something you can control and make sense of, but also, it allows you to sort of get away from a lot of those. You're not running away from reality really, but you're also able to sort of maybe take reality and temper the speed of the news cycle and the intensity of it with a little bit of meaning, in the hills, as you like to spend so much time there.
Yeah. I mean, it was one day was actually sort of funny that popped into my head was, it was election day and Patagonia was a paid holiday, which is awesome. And obviously Montana, I like doing the absentee ballot just cause I like to get online and research everyone and take time to do it. I don't like the rush of going to the polls. So I voted 2 weeks before. And so it was funny that day, it was this weird cycle of weather where all the mountain bike trails were dry again, which doesn't happen in Bozeman, but this local fun, just sort of flow trail called Leverage Canyon was in, and I was like, oh man, that'd be fun. And I just started lapping it. And I was like, man, I'm just going to stay out here and lap till dark because you know what? Someone in some town is literally sitting outside waiting to vote right now for probably as long as I'm going to be out here riding my bike. That my company is paying me to have the day off. I already voted. So I'm sort of getting paid to ride my bike today. This is awesome, and it was just this, and I'm and it also kept me away from the news all day. Right. Which was a really good thing too, because it was this super emotional day because I'd had a relative just passed. And then that it was just a magic day. And there was just something about that amongst everything else going on that just felt right and just kept me motivated.
Yeah, talk a little bit about your job. I mean, listeners will recall we had Alan on the podcast, I don't know, a couple of years ago, or he talked about your work for Patagonia. But, your job went through some ups and downs this year, furlough and so forth. Talk about, job security and then the flexibility of you in a sales role that allows you to kind of work your schedule around some of your athletic objectives. How did the job line out, both in terms of its strengths and weaknesses, to help this project along?
First, obviously, the flexibility of the job is very magical for, having some room to alter this day's schedule. I mean, I'm one of those people that I love just doing emails in the morning with coffee. So it's all the times I'll work 2 or 3 hours starting at 6 a.m. So that flexibility to be okay, I'm going to work 2 or 3 hours in the morning and then go do something and then come back and work another 3 or 4 hours and then go do something and come back and work another 1 or 2 and split up the day, really helped. And, I cover my account basis involves Alaska, and those folks are on a two hours behind me time zone wise. So it does help to like sort of bookend my day where I'm available for some of their stuff later in the day. So schedule wise, it's awesome. Then the furlough piece was interesting. I mean, as we sort of discussed, like Patagonia we had 2 months where our website was basically shut down, and a bunch of the reps had to go on furlough. And it was like, we were one of the departments that got the least hit just because, obviously the sales guys are turning numbers, which helps get the company back on its foot. But there was thoughts that it was funny that my region would have no one here because no one would fly. No one from New York was going to fly to Yellowstone to do their vacation. So my accounts would basically be dead. It turned out that was the opposite. Everyone came here and my accounts were super busy. And so, quickly into the whole furlough thing, they're like, oh man, like we put the wrong people on furlough. So like it was a set time frame where like it was like, oh, you're coming back on this date. So there wasn't this stress of like, oh, I don't have a job. It was more just hitting a pause button, which was hard. I love my job and I love my accounts I work with. And I definitely was still answering, doing things on my Gmail account because we weren't allowed to use our Patagonia address. And I was still fielding texts and phone calls on the side and, trying to keep it minimal because obviously like I wasn't supposed to be working in quotes, but, still kept that rolling as best I could. And yeah, I mean, that was definitely also hard too, just because like I felt this, like my dealers were in the trenches, working through COVID and I was like on vacation getting paid, sort of like Patagonia was very helpful in terms of making sure we were compensated, like in addition to the unemployment / Donnie dollar extra bonus, whatever. So they like paid our sick time to cover it. So it's not like I had no financial hit, so it was just, that's what they're telling me to do. So when that's what you're told to do, you just, I guess, embrace it, so I embraced it the best way I could. Like I just went out and did something fun and, made some lemonade out of that. So, but yeah, there was some stress there, and the company was, there's a lot of stress because I think basically, it was like we were preparing for sort of like economic meltdown, right? And then it didn't really happen with the kind of sports and activities that Patagonia serves. And I don't mean that lightly. I mean, like obviously I recognize a lot of people did have financial impacts, across obviously the economy of the US, but like for Patagonia, it was like people were going to recreate, they're getting outside. So like the demand for our product was high. Our retailers were busy and they were, they all were fried, because they're, especially in my zone, like they're telling people to wear masks that don't want to wear masks because they're, they live in Wyoming and they don't feel they need to, or whatever. It was just, you could feel how stressed and how hard it was for some people. But as a company, we were doing well. In a way, we were just limited, honestly, by like supply chain and transportation issues and other sort of limiters. Those of us that were sort of told we were going to be able to come back were brought back on the date we were told, and life continued on. But the job is very different. Like I'm not allowed to have people in my showroom. I'm not allowed to go into the stores. I mean, I do in my own time, but like I can't go in and say I'm here on Patagonia's behalf working. I have to just like say I'm stopping in to look at something or buy something and like go say hi if I want to. But like,
sure,
I'm actually told not to technically because we don't want to, have a Patagonia employee spread COVID, right? That'd be awful. It's changed. Obviously, a lot of Zoom calls and remote meetings and remote line showings, and it's a very different job right now. But that's, I think, what everyone's dealing with to some extent, So I'd say it's hard for me because I'm not a technology-driven person. I'm more of a face-to-face or person, so it's been a challenge, but one that's manageable, and it's also given me a lot more free time, which helped the vert. So
sure, yeah. I mean that there's sort of costs and benefits, and I would suppose with an endeavor like the vert project, like you got to take any window of opportunity, you have to seize it. So whether it's the furlough, whether it's, hey, I can't go into shops, I can't quite travel as much, whatever it is, you got to look at that as an opportunity to get some vert in the bank, or just take advantage, right?
Yeah, I mean, time became the biggest thing with this. Like, your body is smart enough to adapt, and I mean, you're an athlete, you know that. Your body just it's like, hey, this is what we're doing, and just make it happen. And physically, it's like, yeah, it's not that hard. I mean, it's not that hard. It's the mental and the time and creating the time, and then knowing that you have people around you that you can enjoy that time with too. Versus like everyone around me was like into reading and painting and something else. Like it would be different, right? But most of my friends are like, oh yeah, like we can't go to dinner. Let's go on a mountain bike ride. Let's go ski touring. Like that's just what we do anyway. So, but yeah, time was like the biggest thing, right? It's like, oh, 2 hours. Okay. I'll just go bang out a quick ride from the house, or whatever it was. Like I was just filling that time and definitely limiting and thinking about like, okay, I'll do this one errand today. And then Chelsea and I would share like the list of errands. I'd be like, okay, I can do this one today and this other one tomorrow, but I can't do both, So time became definitely a hot commodity.
Yeah, the time management piece, you got to be a big challenge. You're thinking about like, oh man, I got so many questions about like what your body went through. I mean, I saw you, I guess, early summer, and of course you looked lean, but you sort of looked like you were in the flow. And was there any changes your body went through other than like the sort of metabolic, just being up all the time? Like how did sleep, all these things, like how did the body deal with it?
I definitely had to sleep a lot. I was definitely getting 8 to 9 hours a night, sometimes 10. And then, yeah, eating anything in front of me. I jokingly, there was one coffee shop that I felt was like doing a good job with COVID precautions. And like literally I would go in and anything in the day old half price bucket was like, just like into my hands. But I lost a lot of weight at first, and it actually scared me because I was like, oh, I know if I get below X, I'm gonna get sick. So I like just checked that right away. I was like, okay, start feeding, and I just didn't really. I underestimated how much I had to eat, but then I got that back on track and got to like my sort of healthy weight, and felt really good with once I settled that back in. It was like could just sort of stick it there, and I was like keeping an eye on that. Like, and if I ever started the dip, I would like really follow, like just eat more. Chelsea and I are pretty good about eating healthy, a lot of sort of just veggies and, simple meat and a lot of like we eat a good balanced diet. But definitely stacking a lot of carbs just like in treats what I would do. Like just like when you're out on the bike, like, whatever, cookies, banana bread, Kate's bars. Like I wasn't bringing like, just like goos and gels. Like that stuff was not going to be appetizing for this long a project. So yeah. So like it just sort of like stay on top of the eating, the sleeping, recovery drink. Like I never thought that mattered. I was like, it's a joke. It's just something some nutrition company is trying to sell you. But like if I missed my little like weird recovery drink that I was like working with, I would literally feel like garbage the next day. That was always just something I prepped in the morning, like this First Endurance brand Optogen like recovery drink was like Chelsea had read the ingredient. She's like, that's gold right there. It's got the right amount of this and that. And I'm like, okay. And so I just started taking that with me every day. But other than that, like your body just sort of like gets into the rhythm of something. And I think that's what kept surprising me. Cause like, I remember like, one of your other podcast, frequent, guys, like Foot kept checking in on me. Like, how you doing? How you doing? And I kept being like, dude, I'm waiting for the wheels to fall off and they're not falling off. And that kept surprising me because I was waiting for them to fall off and honestly, I expected them to, and it just wasn't. And so I don't know. It was just like a special sauce of like not going hard, I think too helped. Like when a buddy wants to come out and hammer, I was like, dude, that's not me. I can't just hammer up the hill with you at zone 4 all day. Like, like we got to have conversational pace because I'm doing this tomorrow and the next day and the next.
Yep, exactly.
I became a slave to like on my road bike, that open that I have that you also have. I have a power meter on there. I was like, okay, keep it in this, and I did a couple races and some things here and there, but like really dialing it back. And again, COVID helped because there was no, there was a couple races that were run, but like they were super low key, like nothing intense. So that made it easier, I think, to just have like this like more long haul, steady kind of summer of fun and winter of fun.
Yeah, I mean, those events can consume a lot of mental and physical energy. Just the intensity of racing can have sort of an outsized effect to the time spent in those intensity zones. And not having those things. I mean, I could see how those things could be motivating because they'd be like signposts along the way and things to sort of build your efforts around. But at the same time, they come with a cost as far as the sustainability of the daily effort.
Yeah. And I think, the mental aspect is huge, right? Like, I mean, I think, I was stacking a lot into life, right? Like a lot of hours. And like, if you're focused on, your friends and your partner and work and, and then this project, like to add in traveling to a race or thinking about a race, it's like, and the prep to make sure your gear's dialed. And it's like, man, if I don't have to do that, like, this is actually a lot easier. The COVID cancel happened. It was like, oh, this is so much easier. I can just adventure every day, which, and I mean, I love racing. So it's not like I wouldn't, I'm excited that some of those things are going to happen maybe in 2001, 21 or 22. But, for a year to just like go adventure more and have that be the norm, it actually worked out really well.
Well, Alan, as we close here, what would you say to somebody listening to this just thinking, oh my God, I don't believe this guy was able to do this? Or maybe they're kind of mulling around some sort of a goal that feels audacious that they haven't been willing to really, think about the reality of. Yeah, what piece of advice would you have to somebody who, hears this and is a little bit inspired and maybe needs to take the courage to think about a goal like this?
Well, I think it's like any goal, whether it's, it's work, life-based, anything. Like you have to, if you just look at it as like one big number or one big thing, it's daunting, right? But if you split it up into chunks, like bite-sized chunks, which for me was like sort of like looking at a week at a time, then you just chip away at it. And it becomes like this little bite-sized thing that you're just doing every day and you're stacking it up. And, I think about like, let's say someone's like wants to go climb Everest. You're going to start by, if you live in a city, you're like, okay, I'm going to go climb stairs every day to get fit for this. I'm going to, go travel somewhere where I can go hiking and go on big adventures. Like you chip away at whatever it is you have near you to like prep yourself for something like this. So it's stacking those little bits and pieces at a time. I mean, I think to me, that was like the biggest thing I learned is like, don't look at the big number, just like stack away, chip away at it. But also just recognizing that your body and your mind are like always way stronger than you give them credit for. Like, one thing I sort of felt a lot was like, if I looked outside one day and it was cloudy and gross out, it's like, okay, that's what I'm seeing. But like, it's actually what I say it is to me. Like if I want to go out in this and I put on the right clothes and like have the right attitude, it's actually not gross out. It's actually something beautiful. Like there's something in that cloud or in that, in the woods that's happening right now that's beautiful. And like, if you just continually push yourself out the door with that mentality, no matter what it is, whether it's a work project or something else, like it is what you say it is to yourself. It's a good day. It's a bad day. It's a cloudy day. It's a sunny day. Like those things are as much in your head as they're in the physical. Right. And I think that's for me, one of the lessons now that like everything else now seems, even work stuff and like other projects I'm working on all seem smaller because it's just how I look at them. So I just think it's a lot of mental adaptation, and the physical will just follow if you're doing the right things, for me at least.
Yeah, I think that's great wisdom, Alan. Congratulations on the accomplishment, the record, and just all the learning. And I really appreciate you sharing the story with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Justin.
Thanks for listening to A New Angle. We really appreciate it. And we're coming to you from Studio 49, a generous gift of UM alums Michelle and Lauren Hansen. A New Angle is presented by First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and the University of Montana College of Business, with additional support from Consolidated Electrical Distributors and Drum Coffee. AJ Williams is our producer, VTO, Jeff Ament, and John Wicks made our music, and Jeff Meese is our master of all things sound. If you have any questions, suggestions, comments, insults, whatever, please email me at anewangle@umontana.edu. If you liked what you heard, tell your friends about it. Thanks a lot. See you next time.